Welcome to Mount Isa City Council's Material Recovery Facility Forum, and welcome our one guest. Thank you for turning up. Please note that this ordinary meeting is being recorded in accordance with Council's recording of council meeting policy, which can be viewed on the council website. It is aimed that recordings will be bookmarked, archived and made available for viewing on council's website within 72 hours from the conclusion of the meeting. As a visitor in the public gallery, your presence may be recorded by remaining in the chambers. It is assumed your consent is given if your image is inadvertently broadcast. Please be advised that no protection is offered to the public for comments made during the meeting which are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be defamatory or slanderous. Councillors, council officers and public are required to adhere to the council standing orders policy, model meeting procedures and chambers conditions of entry. Acknowledgement of country. Mount Isa City Council acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land of the Kalkandoons and the Injilinji people on which we work and live, and recognise their continuing connection to land, water and community. We pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Now I'll just hand it over to Bernard Smith, our expert on materials recovery facility.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome everyone. Hopefully a few viewers online to this forum. I suppose a bit of background. There's been a lot of activity at the state and federal government level, well, for a long time, but particularly in the last couple of years. The federal government has recently introduced a policy to recover 80% of waste by 2030. And they are implementing export bans on glass and plastics. Their policy approach is due to a range of reasons, but I think was particularly highlighted in the last 1 to 2 years in terms of the amount of waste which Australia was exporting overseas. The state government policy, their policy is 50% of household waste recycled by 2025. They've implemented a waste levy, which I'll talk a bit about in a moment, to send a price signal to the community and as part of, and as a measure to achieve that goal. And of course the state government's made a commitment to the circular economy as well, which is where, materials are reused. Steel is a good example, a number of times rather than continuously going or having to utilise the raw material. I suppose the most fundamental question is why recycle? Well, of course, it's good environmental practices, it saves resources, saves energy. As I said, it reduces the need for raw materials. Community expectations. We undertook a survey, council undertook a survey last year where over 90% of respondents wanted to see council do more in terms of recycling. Not a reason in itself, but curbside recycling has been in Australia for over 30 years, which goes to the need for it, the desire by the community for it and the advantages of it. Recycling does save landfill space. Landfilling is expensive. It's not just a matter of finding a hole and putting the rubbish in it. In this day and age, landfills are highly engineered pieces of infrastructure. We will be in a position possibly of needing a new what is called a landfill cell in 2 to 3 years' time. That will cost us maybe $2, $3, $4 million. So airspace, as they call it, is a very valuable commodity. So if we can avoid it or extend the life of a landfill, that's a significant saving to council. And recycling does save the community money in terms of avoiding the landfill levy, which I'll talk a little bit about now. The state government introduced the landfill levy in 2019 as a mechanism to drive change. Dare I say it was a tax. It was imposed to generate recycling initiatives, generate research and development in terms of reusing materials, and to send a real signal to the community and industry and the public at large that we cannot keep landfilling forever. Currently, the landfill levy is $80 a tonne, and it will be going up $5 a year for the next 2 to 3 years at least. When it was introduced in 2019, the state government also introduced a rebate. In other words, you paid your levy, then you got it paid back again. That was in order to give local government time, and I should clarify that, the rebate was with regard to domestic waste, what we collect at the curbside. Commercial waste and other waste didn't attract the rebate. That was to give local government time to adjust to the fact that at some point in the future they would not be getting the rebate. The rebate will be reviewed in 2022, but the expectation is that that will either be totally withdrawn or it may be withdrawn on a staged basis. After all, you don't introduce a levy and then pay the levy back without reason, and that reason is at some point in time that rebate will be withdrawn. Council's total waste levy payment for domestic and commercial for April was $167,000. Of that, council was reimbursed approximately $70,000 to reflect the waste component, the domestic waste component. And as I said, this will start to be withdrawn next year. We anticipate that with the introduction of curbside recycling, we will be saving approximately $160,000 a year in avoided landfill levy. What is council proposing? I'll go into a little bit more detail in a moment. The construction of a materials recovery facility, which is essentially a big shed full of sorting machinery. The introduction of a fortnightly curbside recycling collection. Greater focus on recycling, construction and demolition waste. After all, we're paying, or the levy is paid per tonne on waste. Construction and demolition waste is particularly heavy, and we believe there is the real opportunity there to, particularly for clean loads, to sort that construction and demolition waste and reuse it. It could be reusing clean soil and material for cover for the landfill. It could be crushing concrete and being able to use that in roads and other applications. And the other important thing council is proposing, and this is particularly needs noting, is the introduction of a weekly garbage collection. And I'll come back and dwell on that in a moment. What will be recycled? The things most of the community now recycles. In other parts of Australia, paper, cardboard, aluminium, steel, etc. We anticipate over time that that list of materials which can be recycled will expand. There are a lot of grants programs at the moment from both the state and federal governments which are aimed at stimulating research and development in not only exploring what other materials can be recycled, but more importantly, generating markets for those recycled materials. How will it work? The council will empty the curbside recycling bin every fortnight. That will be transported to the landfill to the materials recovery facility. That facility will comprise some hand sorting of material. It will also, we anticipate, comprise some elevators, some screens, probably magnetic separators as well. But there will be a manual component as well. That material will be baled or packaged depending on the nature of the material and then on-sold. And as I mentioned before, as part of the design of the facility, we'll be looking at incorporating the sorting of construction and demolition waste as well. Every tonne we can keep out of the landfill is not only has the environmental benefit, but avoids the landfill levy as well. What will it cost? The capital cost will be at least $9 million, approximately $9 million. We have received federal funding of just over $6 million. It will be a cost to operate of approximately $570,000 per year, excluding depreciation. One would hope over time, as more markets and better markets are delivered for products made from recycled materials, that cost may reduce. However, we can't anticipate anything there. We expect the introduction of the facility will divert approximately 1,900 tonnes of recyclables every year and reduce the landfill levy component by approximately $160,000. That's excluding any potential avoided levies associated with construction and demolition waste. And that, of course, will reduce that operating cost from $570 down to around $1,000 a year. There will be an impact on the garbage collection. Currently, residents, as we're all aware, have 2 garbage collection services per week. What the curbside recycling will introduce is, in effect, 3 bin collections per fortnight instead of 4 bin collections per fortnight. Of course, some of the material from the current garbage bin will be going into the recycling bin. So there is, as I said, that from effectively 4 bin collections per fortnight to 3 collections. Council could maintain the additional garbage collection or 2 garbage collections per week. That would be at a cost of $230,000 a year. I think it is fair to comment that the prevailing practice, pretty much overwhelmingly the prevailing practice, is a once-a-week garbage collection across the rest of the nation, combined with a fortnightly curbside collection. And in some instances now, a lot of councils have a 3rd bin as well, which is organic or green waste collection. There, some councils do, of course. You can pay for an additional garbage collection, but I'll just come to that in a moment. The other concern which has been mentioned is that of our hot weather, which is an understandable concern. I think it must be said that there are a lot of hot parts of Australia, and yes, it does need, depending on the residents' waste habits, it can need some managing. If you have sort of 2 kilos of prawns the day after the bin collection, yes, people may need to put them in the freezer or seal them up or take whatever measure they deem appropriate, but that has been able to be managed in many other parts of Australia, and but it will require some forethought by residents. I think also, like any community, we have a turnover of people. I think at the last census, 43% of Mount Isa residents had changed addresses in the previous 5 years. Of course, some of those may have moved within Mount Isa, but any regional or any community has a fair turnover, and there would be a lot of people in Mount Isa who have experienced curbside recycling in other places that they have lived. Another comment, just to briefly touch on too, is of course we now have the container exchange program, where you can take your empties and receive a few cents for each one returned. That was introduced probably 20 or 30 years ago in South Australia, initially as a litter control mechanism, and very much there is still a litter control angle to it, but of course it does aid in recycling as well. It's not considered to be to the detriment of curbside recycling. In fact, one of the revenue streams for the MRF is the equivalent container deposit paid to the operator of MRF on the basis of the empties which they do collect. And just very quickly, there's some local government comparisons with other possibly similar locations. Cairns, Darwin, Alice Springs, Broome, all have a once a week 240 litre garbage collection and except for Alice Springs, a fortnightly recycling service. Council does have the option of giving consideration to maintaining that additional curbside weekly garbage collection. One, as I mentioned earlier, was maintaining it across the board at a cost of $230,000. The other one is to give residents the option of having an additional 240 or 120 litre bin for that matter at an additional cost. By way of example, Hinchinbrook Council provide the option of an additional 240 litre bin at a cost of around $190 per year. So where does the project stand at the moment? Council has been successful in attracting the funding and it has made provision in next year's capital work budget to move on with the project. Council has formally resolved to commence the detailed design of the materials recycling facility, i.e. the machinery which will go inside the facility. As part of the design, Council wishes to consider the option of incorporating the sorting of construction and demolition waste, as I've mentioned earlier. It certainly wished to undertake this consultation process with the community, and particularly ensuring the community is aware of the proposed weekly garbage collection service, and which lines up with the fourth part of what in effect is Council's resolution, options for residents wishing to have an additional garbage collection service. So that was the Council resolution approximately 2 months ago. Where to next? We're about to engage a designer for the equipment. Following that, we then know how large the shed is. To put it very simply, the equipment can be installed and commissioned, and then the commencement of the service will be late 2022 or early 2023. Of course, it is quite a complex undertaking. Community consultation and community information is going to be vital. It is a significant change, not only for the resident but for the council itself in terms of how it manages its waste stream and how the landfill site itself operates as well. And of course, we would welcome any queries, feedbacks.
Okay, thank you, Bernard. I open it up to the floor. No questions?
I have to ask one question.
Yeah, with the recycling of the construction materials, is there any more detail on that? Are we proposing like a concrete crushing facility?
Yeah, it probably wouldn't involve a permanent on-site facility, but there are mobile crushing plants. So yes, I think that would be a really important part of it. You'd be looking at your timber waste, your clean soil, dirt, rubble, so forth, your concrete. Obviously, there are loads which come in at times which have a bit of everything, and that they might be a bit of a lost cause. However, because there has effectively been no recycling in Mount Isa, there's very fertile ground there in terms of community awareness and education, and sort your load before you come, and even for commercial and industrial users as well. So we are about to commence an audit, a more detailed audit of the waste stream, just to break it up into those components and see how much there is of each. And then we can consider each one individually and how we would manage it. But something like concrete, we'd probably stockpile it for a period.
Green waste?
Yeah, green waste, we had a query around that last week. Given the climate and the amount generated, there may not be enough for a proper composting operation. That has to be done well. So then the other options are mulching, of course, and using it for cover on the landfill. So that would be one of the key options.
Is it?
Yeah, that's it. Otherwise, I think it's,
Okay, no,
I think it's great to see we're getting some recycling facilities.
okay, that's all we have today. Thank you for everybody coming. Thanks to the online